I know it's kind of like the elephant in the room for a lot of Bears fans right now. Um, I had like a little theory the other day, and it's it was more of just something that I was thinking about in terms of the Ashton Jeanty situation because I've
I
always
love
said
it.
it.
I love it that we can like put a label
Uh-huh.
on that, the Ashton Jeanty situation. We have an
Look,
Ashton Jeanty
I,
situation.
I will say, look, I am not opposed to the player. I think he is going to be a great pro. I think the way he plays is really fun to watch. I'm just not of the opinion that picking a running back at 10 in a deep running back class is a good option. Now, saying that, if they do pick him at that point, I will be annoyed that we picked a running back, but 5 minutes later, probably buying his jersey. So like, it's on that scale. But like, what I will say is, if I was Ryan Poles, I would be doing exactly what it seems like Ryan Poles and people within the Bears are doing, is telling everybody and their son that we're interested in drafting Ashton Jeanty for a
Yeah.
couple of reasons. Number one, if there's a team in front of you gets a little nervous that you might want to get the guy that they want, they might draft him and it makes somebody that you actually want fall to you. And then number two, if there's a team like the Dallas Cowboys that are just 2 picks behind you that actually want to bring in a running back like they've done plenty of times in the first round, if they think that you're drafting him, they'll want to move up. And maybe they want to move up with you. So that's where it also can get interesting. And I would not be surprised that we're hearing it from like all these different reporters are saying, oh, like the Bears are an option for Ashton Gent. They made it. I think it was one of the guys on ESPN was saying that, oh, well, the Bears are talking about Ashton Jeanty when they're talking about all these potential options. And look, they should be because he's a phenomenal football player. It's just the fact that the positional value at 10 for me just doesn't make sense. It would be different if it was a glaring weakness and the backs in this class were not very good. And he was
Sure.
like the only standout guy. But unfortunately, for people that really do like Ashton Jeanty, there's too many good options there to where you don't need to take one at 10. Like we've mentioned it on previous ones. You can I've always said as like a joking one that if they wanted to get rid of DeAndre Swift and just draft the 2 running backs from Ohio State, you could do that because they're again similar in terms of what you might want. But there's so many. We've mentioned a couple in the last episode. There's a lot of options at running back. Again, if the Bears decide that they want to go in that direction, and look, I can see the rationale behind it in terms of for the offense, right? Because Ben Johnson does like a heavy run attack and he bases his passing game off of the rushing attack. The Bears need to improve on that. They just spent a lot on the interior of the offensive line. So if they drafted Ashton Jeanty, would I be surprised? No, because the talent is worthy of the 10th pick, but the positional value for me is not. And that's where I'm at in terms of him and why I don't believe that that's going to be the best option for the Bears moving forward. But
All right.
again, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened, right?
Yeah, I
Like,
wouldn't either. And I'm going to give counterpoint to this.
yeah,
And what you said is true. It is an incredibly deep running back class. Everybody that follows my work knows that I love running backs. I am in hog heaven. I posted the Scrooge McDuck GIF the other day, and I was like, let's go. This is such a joy for me to scout this running back class because you're at pick 100, you're at pick 150, you're at pick 170. You're still finding running backs who could start and play well in this league. And that is just a pure joy to me. So positional value in this draft is the biggest con against that. You can get one later and you don't have to spend that pick.
mm-hmm.
Here are the pros. You fix the offensive line. If you hadn't fixed the offensive line, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Definitely do not pick a running back in the top 10. You fix the offensive line as well as you could possibly fix it in one offseason. You fixed it. 2, Ben Johnson's your head coach. He drafted a guy way higher than all of us thought, including me, Jahmyr Gibbs. We were like, what are you doing? 2 years later, Jahmyr Gibbs is the absolute engine of that offense that almost took them to the Super Bowl. So you have a coach now that understands how to use a preeminent runner. And Ashton Jeanty, make no mistake, folks. I saw some little bit of shade towards Jeanty in the chat earlier. No. Ashton Jeanty is Paul Bunyan. He's the legit deal. If you start comparing him production wise, you get about 3 comparisons deep. They're all Hall of Famers, and you're like, this is what we're talking about, folks. A couple of crazy examples. Like you could say, oh, Marion Hampton, great back. I love a Marion Hampton. Been singing his praises for 2 years. I was like, Drake May, look at the running back. Oh, Marion Hampton, he's amazing. He had 1,200 yards after contact this year, which is ridiculous. After he got touched, he had 1,200 yards. You're like, man, that's amazing. Jeanty had almost 2,000 yards after contact. You're like, what? You're like, oh, that guy broke. He forced 80 missed tackles in 300 attempts. That's a great rate. That's ridiculous. Cam Skadoo forced 100 missed tackles. You're like, what the hell? That guy's so elusive. Ashton Jeanty forced almost 200. You're just like, what? It just blows everything else out of the water. So we have to consider the player. And I will say this without apology. Ashton Jeanty is the best player at his job in this draft. Mm-hmm. And I will take no arguments. Like you can say positional value. The Abdul Carter folks can say Abdul Carter. I've heard former GMs, Mark Dominic said Abdul Carter is the best football player in this draft. I'm not going to argue with him about that because he's combining the player's ability and his value, his positional value. And if that's the case, yeah, Abdul Carter is probably the best player in this draft. And as you said, running back positional value is not the same. But Abdul Carter is not better at being an edge than Ashton Jeanty is at being a running back. Mm-hmm. Like that's not debatable in any way. You can stack it up and say, take all the edges drafted for the last 10 years, take all the running backs drafted for the last 10 years, and let's compare Jeanty and Abdul Carter to those groups. And Jeanty would destroy Carter in all those metrics. Again, running back, not as impactful as edge. Unfortunately, the Bears don't have a shot at Abdul Carter. He's not going to end up there. Stress reaction or not, lots of folks arguing at the combine over beers with no medical degrees about what a stress reaction is. That was fun. Like, oh, I think it's that. I'm like, what do you know, man? You write columns just like I do. We don't know what a stress reaction is. But he's the best football player. And for the Hunter folks, like Hunter is a legit, like, all-decade corner. If he plays a corner, he could be an all-time great wide receiver as well. Is he as good as Jeanty is at being a running back at being corner? And I would say he's not. Like, so if it happens, and I'm not saying it's the thing, but you might get into this spot where nobody wants to trade down. You can't maximize that pick for other picks. The couple of tackles you think, you want to save yourself $20 million with by, picking them and hoping they develop, they're not there. They're gone. Abdul Carter's off the board. And you're looking at, a smorgasbord of Malachi Starks, a couple of edge rushers, James Pierce, who certainly has questions. If you think he doesn't, you haven't been listening. Mike Green also has questions. Same thing. Second verse. Maybe Jihad Campbell's there, but again, we're right back to the same argument, right? Running backs and inside linebackers are basically two sides of the same coin. They don't have a lot of positional value. You already have a pretty good roster if you're the Bears in that position, and you're staring at this kind of like, well, there's a great inside linebacker, there's a great safety, there's a great running back, and maybe there's a great tight end in Tyler Warren, who should absolutely be in the discussion. Who are we picking? And I've seen chat say best player available at that point. If you can't move down, I would agree. Best player available at that point is Ashton Jeanty. Now you could say, hey, class is deeper. If I don't pick, say, Tyler Warren, I'm not going to get a tight end of that quality later on, which is not necessarily the same thing with running back. There is much more quality later on. So you could pivot and pick Warren and pick a running back later on. I'd be fine with that. But you might get to this spot where you have a rebuild offensive line, a coach that knows how to use a super talented running back, a generational or better running back. And I use that term as a 20-year term, not a 5-year term, like a lot of people. Like, it just might sit there and look, he already knows how to wear blue and orange. So who knows? Put him behind that line and let him cook.
Hangs out with Caleb as well already.
Yeah, so, a little bit.
Look, a little bit. a lot of the points I agree with, because if you had to ask me without, again, you ignore the positional value, you just look at the players, you analyze their tape from college football. Ashton Jeanty was probably the best player this year when you're looking at it in terms of in college football, especially in this draft class. It is one of those that, now, this is where the Bears have helped themselves. You mentioned it. They fixed the interior of their offensive line, which was the biggest weakness and was a reason why the rushing attack was so bad. Like, they weren't getting any push. So if you bring in Ashton Jeanty, he's probably scoring a bunch of touchdowns in the red zone because he's going to break tackles for days there. And it makes it actually helps guys like DeAndre Swift, Roshan Johnson, because you then really do have a difference maker in that room, but also it's hard to stop when you have both Swift and him kind of coming in and out. And it is something that would be it has to be enticing for guys when you look at it. But again, it's going to come down to where the Bears value that position. Where does Ben Johnson value that position? If he says, I need a difference maker at that position, I don't care that it's a running back, the Bears are probably going to take Ashton Jeanty at number 10.